how we can make these destructible objects, as you can see, and after some period of time it just destroyed itself. So we're gonna have a look on animation, how we can make the transition and how we can trigger the transition, as well as how we can grab the reference in the start function. And before I jump into the coding part or in this tutorial, I want to thanks donating me on Patreon, and I want to thanks Neith, Roald City takes for donating me on Patreon. And if you guys want to do that, then you can do it Patreon, and by that you will unlock many benefits. So check that out. So make sure you check that out. So now let's dive into this tutorial, and it's just gonna be a mini full tutorial, you can simply assume. So let's dive into this. Destructible objects, basically we need to download. So I will have a link in the description, you can go and check that out. So for that I'm gonna move over to my project tab, assets, and I will head over to my sprites folder, and I will head over to my destructibles folder. As you can see, we have the sprite sheet. So let's select that. Let's go over to inspector in the right, and I'm gonna click on this open sprite editor. So as you can notice, it slices automatically. Instead of doing that, we're gonna slice it individually. So firstly we need to choose sprite mode to multiple in our inspector tab, and pixel per unit we're gonna choose a less number in order to make these sprites a little bit larger. So I'm gonna go with 16, something like that. And if we take a closer look by scrolling our mouse, we can see it seems blurry. So to get rid of that, we're gonna choose filter mode to point no filter. And after doing all of these things, let's click on this apply button in the bottom right. And now as soon as we click apply, the blurry is gone now. And move over to your sprite editor tab. In the top left you can see slice, so just click on it, and let's select this automatic to create by cell count, and let's count how many columns and rows we have. So we can see I guess let's count that. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 columns. So we're gonna put 7 columns. And how many we have rows, so let's count that as well. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. So we're gonna put 12 rows and 7 columns. And after doing that, let's click on this slice, and we're gonna click on this apply button. As soon as we click on apply, now it slices perfectly. And I'm gonna select my game view, and let's go over to that spreadsheet, and let's click on this arrow in order to see the individuals. So I'm going to select my part 1, but before I do, I'm going to select my player game object in the hierarchy. So let's move over to hierarchy, and let's select this player game object, and let's press down F on our keyboard in order to focus on that. So what we're going to do, we're going to select our part, but I'm gonna move my player, let's leave it right over here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select the first part sprite. So let's select that, basically the individual one, and drag it into the scene view or into this hierarchy. So I'm gonna drag it into my scene view, and I'm gonna call this one part. So let's call this one part, and we're gonna add some components to this pod game object. First thing, I'm gonna add a rigid body 2D for gravity. So let's click on this add component, and let's find our rigid body 2D, and let's attach that. And I'm gonna scale up my gravity. So let's go over to gravity scale, and I'm gonna choose something like 3 or 5. And collision detection, I'm gonna choose continuous, so it will continuously detect any collision. And also we need to attach one more component, which is a collider 2D 2D for collision detection, else this pod just gonna pass through our ground. So that's why. So we're gonna click on this add component, and let's add a box collider 2D. So I'm gonna we can do box collider 2D, and we can do also with circle collider 2D. So make sure you just choose a collider 2D which just gonna fit the sprite perfectly. I think circle collider 2D just gonna be fine. So I'm gonna attach circle. So let's find that, and let's click on it in order to attach. And we need to adjust the radius of this collider 2D as size of this sprite, you can simply say. So we're gonna move over to circle collider 2D component. Let's move over to offset. I'm gonna beat offset, and I'm gonna do in the Y a little bit down, and let's make the radius a little bit less, something around 0.1. Sorry, we have to make it So sorry, we basically need to move over to this radius, and we're gonna choose something around a zero point 0.5, I guess. So 0.5 seems pretty much fine, but we need to move a little bit up the circle collider 2D and little bit in the x axis to just adjust the size of our sprite. So we can move over to this offset in the x. So let's move it something around, I guess zero point 0.1 seems pretty much perfect number, and we need to drag it up a little bit. So in the offset y axis, I'm gonna do something around like this much. So minus 0.12 seems a perfect number. So minus 0.12, it's perfect. So once you're done, make sure you select your game object, and we're gonna drag it in the top of our hierarchy so we can see all the time. And what we want to do, we want to assign this port as a port game object or as a destructible game object, since this gonna have. But before we do, let's make the animation first. So firstly, we're gonna have two animation clips. One, we're gonna have the destruction animation clip, and the second one will be the idle. Basically, it's not gonna play any animation at all. It's gonna be something like this port idle. So to do that, what we can do, we can select the port game object in the hierarchy, then move over to animation tab, and then click on this create button. So let's click on it, and we're gonna move over to assets. In assets, I already created a animation folder, as you can notice. So I'm gonna open that up, and if you don't have it, then you can just right click and then new in the bottom, then folder, and you can name that folder to something like animation. Since I already have one, so I'm gonna open that up by double clicking on it, and we can create a subfolder for our destructible objects. So let's create that to keep our project in a organized way. So let's right click, then new in the bottom folder, and I'm gonna call this folder to something like destructible destructibles underscore animation. So let's call that like that, and we're gonna hit enter to create that. Let's open that up by double clicking on it, and now we have to name the animation. So since this will be the port idle, basically it's not gonna do anything like that, so we can simply call it port underscore idle. And after doing that, let's click on this save button, and once we're done, as you can just click on this red button to capture the animation clip, and we can click on this red button one more time. Basically, we need to record the animation, and we already done. And if we just go if we select our port game object and then click on this play button, we can see it's playing not any animation clip, something like that. So you can just do that, or what else you can do, you can select your port game object, then move over to animation tab, click on this red button to record the animation, then click on this add property, then go over to sprite renderer, and in the bottom we can see sprite, so we can click on this plus icon in the right section. And if we just go ahead and then click on this play button, it's gonna play this animation clip, as you can notice. So basically this is fine, and we can click the red button to capture the animation. Now we're gonna have the second animation, which will just gonna play the destructible animation clip. To create that, we can simply click over here and then click on this create new clip, and we can name the clip whatever we want, something like port underscore destructible. So instead of doing this, we're gonna do in a fast way. To do that, I'm gonna cut this tab. To do that, I'm gonna move over to my project tab first, then that destructibles folder, and I have the destructible animations, basically individual sprite, as you can notice. So what we can do, we can select from the first. So this from, I guess, this from this one, which is 20. So 20, 21, 22, from I guess 29. So from 29, it's playing the destructible animation clip. So from this 20, we're gonna select. So we're gonna select from this 20 to 29 by holding down shift, and then drag it over to this port game object in the hierarchy top of this port game object, and it's gonna make the animation right away. So basically this is a pretty fast way in order to make the animation clip. So we will head over to our assets folder, then animation folder, and we're gonna open up our destructible underscore animation subfolder, and we have to name the animation. So this so since this gonna be the destructible one, so we can simply call this one something like pot underscore destructible. Let's call it pot underscore destructible, something like that. And after doing that, let's click on this save button. And if we just select our pot and then move over to animation tab, and if we click over here, we can see we have the pot destructible. And if we click on this play button, we can notice it's playing the pot destructible animation clip over again and again. Basically it seems pretty much fine, and I want this animation clip to be loop as well as the idle one. So what we can do to stop looping that, we can move over to our project tab, assets. Basically we need to head over to in which folder we place it, or we just created those animation clip of this board. So since we created inside this animation folder, so we will head over to animation assets folder, then animation, and we're gonna find our destructible underscore animation folder. As you can notice, so we can see both of this animation clip, we have the pot underscore destructible as well as pot underscore idle. So I'm gonna select both of them by holding down shift and then go over to inspector in the right. As you can notice loop time and it says check, so I'm gonna uncheck in order to you can simply say to stop looping. And now what we're gonna do, we need to make transition between this animation clip. So if I just go ahead and then click on this play button, you will able to notice this pot just gonna play the pot idle animation clip right after the game start. And you can notice in your animator tab, as you can see, so as soon as our game just gonna start, you will able to notice this pot just gonna play the pot underscore idle animation clip. So we also need to make transition to pot destructible. So as you can notice, as soon as our game started, this pot just played or stuck at this pot underscore idle animation clip. So we also need to make transition from this pot idle to pot destructible. When we should, once this player game object just gonna damage this pot or attack this pot game object. So in a get out of play mode, and we will select our pot, then move over to your animator tab. So we need to make transition between this animation clip. So let's right click on this pot and underscore idle, and let's click on that make transition, and let's make transition to pot destructible. And we're gonna select this transition or this arrow, and we will go over to inspector. Then we're gonna uncheck this as exit time, because as soon as this pot just takes damage or this player game object attacks on it, it should play the pot underscore destructible animation clip right away. So that's why we just uncheck the has exit time, and also transition duration we're gonna set it to 0. And if we scroll down, we need to choose a condition in which condition we want to play the animation clip. So we're gonna choose a condition for it. To do so, we're gonna move over to our animator tab, and we're gonna select this parameter in the left side. Right side we can see in our animator tab, and then click on this plus icon, and we're gonna choose a trigger for it, and we have to name that trigger. So I'm gonna call something like distract, something like that, distract. Let's call it distract, and I'm gonna choose this condition. So let's select this arrow from this idle to our destructible, then go over to inspector, and we're gonna click on this plus icon in the bottom, and we're gonna choose this distract condition. And now if we go ahead and then click on this play button and manually try to trigger this distract parameter, you will able to notice that a pot game object just gonna play the destructible animation clip right away. So just wait a moment and you will notice that. So just wait a little moment. So now as you can see, it's playing the pot idle. And if we go ahead and select my pot in the hierarchy, then move over to animator tab, and then try to trigger this distract parameter manually, basically check on it. As you can see, as soon as we check, it just plays the pot underscore a destructible animation clip, as you can notice. So basically we need to trigger this parameter inside this pot game object, and for it we're gonna make a function. So let's get out of play mode. So what we will do, we basically need to trigger this distract parameter. But before we do, let's make this pod game object a prefab, so we're gonna have the copy of it. So let's select our pod game object in the hierarchy, and let's drag it over to this assets folder in order to turn it into a prefab. And make sure you just create a prefab folder and then drag it there. So I'm going to drag it inside my prefab folder. Now as you can notice, I just made it a prefab of it. So what I'm gonna do, so we need to assign this pod game object as a pod tag, so we can check that this is our pod and it's need to distract. So that's why, or it's need to play the destructible animation clip whenever our player damage to it. So we're gonna assign this pod game object as a pod tag. To do so, I'm gonna select my pod game object in the hierarchy, then go over to inspector and tag. As you can see, it says untag, so let's click there, and we're gonna click on this add tag in the bottom, and we're gonna assign, we're gonna create a new tag for this pod. So let's click on this plus icon, and we're gonna name it to something like pod. And after doing that, let's click on that save button, and we're gonna select our pod game object in the hierarchy one more time, and we're gonna move over to inspector, and we're gonna assign with our pod. Now as you can notice, I assigned it this pod game object as a pod tag. And make sure you just move over to our overrides and then apply all if you turn it your pod as into a prefab. So make sure you just do that. And now we assign it this pod as a pod game object. Basically now it's fine. And now what we need to do, we need to play the that animation clip of that pod destructible. But when we shoot, once our player game object shoot out bullet and the bullet collide with this pod game object, then we're gonna do that. So we're gonna create a script for this pod game object to do that. So what we will do, we will move over to our project tab, assets, and then a script folder, or you can simply right click on these assets, right click, then create mono behavior script, and you can name that script to something like destructible or distract. So as you can notice, I already created. So I'm going to select my pod game object in the hierarchy, and let's select that script, and let's drag it over to this add component section in the inspector. And now basically you need to attach that, and we're going to double click on it in order to open that up in Visual Studio. And but before I do, I want to check what I name my bullet basically as a bullet tag or not. So for that, I'm gonna move over to my project tab, assets, and then prefabs folder, and I will head over to my bullets. So let's find that, and I have the bullet over here, so let's find that. If I select my bullet and then move over to inspector, as you can notice, I assigned this bullet as a bullet tag. So we want to check if this pod game object trigger or collide with a game object has a tag called bullet, then this pod game object need to play that animation clip, which is the trigger. So firstly, we're gonna open up our script by double clicking on it, and let's go to top of our class, or let's remove this update function, and instead of doing that, we're gonna use this on trigger enter 2D function. So on trigger enter 2D function, and we do know that this function get called when we trigger with something. And if we select our bullet, a bullet, and then go over to inspector, then box collider 2D component, we can see that we just check is trigger to true inside this bullet. So we just check. So we're gonna check with trigger. So that's why we using that function instead of using on collision enter 2D function. So this function get called with when we trigger with something, and we do know that we can extract information what we collided with by going over to this collision parameter. So what we're gonna do over here, we just want to check. So we're gonna use this if condition. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if the game object we trigger it with has a tag called bullet. So we're gonna use this collision dot game object, and then we're gonna access the tag of it. So we're gonna type this dot tag, and we will check if it's equals to bullet. If that is the case, then what we're gonna do, we're gonna destroy our pod right away, or basically we need to play that animation clip. But before we do, we're gonna print out a message for now for testing purposes. So I'm gonna type this debug.log, debug.log, and we're gonna say something like pod takes damage, something like that. Pod takes damage. And let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Control S on our keyboard to save our script. So collision dot game object basically means the game object we trigger it with. So if the player game object fired the bullet and the bullet collide with this pod game object, then that bullet just gonna be our collision dot game object. Collision dot game object basically means the game object we trigger it with. So we definitely gonna trigger with that bullet, and what we doing, we accessing the tab of that game object and we checking if it's equals to bullet. Basically means if the game object that we trigger it with has a call tag a bullet, then what we doing, we simply for now printing out message, but we need to play that animation clip and we're gonna play it later. For now we're gonna check that out, so just wait a moment and you will understand. So just wait a moment and let's go over to a Unity editor, and now it's fine. And I'm gonna select my console tab and let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game. And let's have a look on this. So as soon as this player game object just gonna fire our bullet and the bullet trigger with this pod game object, then the message just gonna pop up says a pod takes damage as we type inside that debug.log function. So let's fire that bullet. So I'm gonna fire, sorry, as you can see, as soon as our bullet triggering with this pod game object, the message in our console tab just getting pop up says pod takes damage, as you can notice. Basically it's working fine. So instead of doing this, we basically need to trigger this parameter. So if I select my pod in the hierarchy, then move over to animator tab and trigger this distract parameter manually, as you can see it's playing that animation clip. Basically means it's working fine. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get out of play mode and we need to trigger this distract parameter instead of printing out message. So we're gonna move over to our script. So before we trigger that parameter, what we need a reference of this animator component. So we need a reference of this animator component of this pod game object, and we do know this animator component is responsible for playing our animation clip. So that's why we need a reference of it. So we're gonna move over to our script. So let's double click on it and let's go to top of our class, and it doesn't need to be public, instead we're gonna make it private. So we're gonna make a private, and the component we're looking for is an animator. So we're gonna type this animator, sorry, animator, and let's call this animator, something like that. And since we're making private, so we're gonna use this start function in order to grab the reference of this animator component. So to get grab the reference, we need to use this dot game object dot get component. So and make these arrows, and inside these arrows you need to pass the component that you just want to grab the reference. So in our case animator, and we're gonna make this first bracket and then close that up with semicolon. Now we have the animator component, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna store it inside this animator parameter that we created up here. So we're gonna store the animator component inside this animator. Let's set equal to this. So this dot game object basically right over here, it's basically referencing this pod game object itself. So we just going over to this animator component, and we taking this animator component and we storing inside this animator variable. Basically we just grabbing the reference in the start of the game. Now we have the reference animator component and we are ready to trigger this distract parameter. To do so, let's go over to script. So instead of printing out message over here, we will go to animator component, animator, and we're going to use dot set trigger function. And this set trigger function, inside this bracket in quotation, it's gonna take the parameter name, and make sure you spell it correct. So I'm gonna move over to my Unity, and we can see the parameter name or the condition name is distract. So we need to spell it correct and make sure you pass inside quotation. So we're gonna pass distract and the parameter is correct, and we're going to close that up with semicolon, and let's press down Ctrl S to save our script and then move over to Unity. So what we're doing basically, firstly we're going over to animator, basically this animator component of this pod game object, and then triggering that you can simply say triggering that distract parameter. And we do know that once we trigger that, it's gonna play that animation clip, which is the destructible one as we created earlier. So we created two animation clip, which is pod idle and the pod destructible one. So just wait a moment and you will see. So as soon as our bullet just gonna trigger with that pod game object, then that pod game object just gonna play that animation clip. So let's have a look on this. So let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game, and let's have a look on this. So just wait a moment and you will see. So as soon as the bullet just gonna trigger with this board game object, that animation just gonna play right away. So just wait a moment. If I just as you can see, as soon as our bullet trigger with that this board game object, we can see it's played that animation clip, which is the destructible one, and after that it just collapsed. But the problem is that it's still in this scene view. So after some round of time, or what else we can do, we can simply just disable this circle collider 2D, so this player game object can easily pass through it. And also we need to set the gravity scale to 0 of this pod game object, so it's not gonna fall down due to our gravity. So if I select my pod and then go over to inspector rigid body 2D, we can see gravity scale to 3. So we're gonna set it to 0, and after doing that we also gonna disable this circle collider 2D. So we need a reference of this circle collider 2D component of this pod game object, so then we can do it. So let's get out of play mode, and we're gonna open up our script by double clicking on it, distract. So let's go to top of our class and let's grab the reference, our rigid body as well as the circle collider, and we're gonna do the same way as we have done with animator. So we're gonna grab the reference private and the component we're looking for our rigid body 2D, and we're gonna call this one RB, or short for rigid body 2D. And also we need a reference of the circle collider 2D, so we're gonna make it private, and that is a circle collider 2D, and we're gonna call this one collider 2D, something like that. So so what we're gonna do now, so we're getting an green outline underneath our collider 2D. If you just want to get rid of that, you can just put new in front of this private, or you can simply name that to something else. Let's call it circle collider 2D, something like that, and it's gonna be fine. Now it seems fine, and let's move over to this start function. So start function, we do know is the get call in the start of the game. So in the start of the game we need to get reference of this rigid body 2D as well as the circle collider 2D, and we're gonna do the same way we have done with animator. So let's go to RB, and we're gonna grab the reference. So we're gonna type this dot game object, basically means itself, and dot, we're gonna use this dot get component, and the component we're looking for is a rigid body 2D. Sorry, we need to type this rigid body 2D, and let's make first bracket and then close that up with semicolon. So this dot game object, basically it's just referencing itself, and we just getting this rigid body 2D component, as you can notice in the inspector. And what we're doing, we're storing that rigid body into this RB that we created up over here, as you can notice. And we're gonna do the same thing with this circle collider 2D. So let's use this dot game object, and we're gonna get the component which is a circle collider 2D. So let's make this arrows circle collider 2D, and then make this first bracket, close that up with semicolon, and we have the circle collider 2D by now, basically this one. And now we need to store it into that circle collider parameter, or into that container that we created up here. So we're gonna store our circle collider 2D into this. So basically we're simply taking this circle collider 2D and we're storing into this circle collider 2D variable, or in this container as we created up over here. So after playing the destruct animation clip, what we want to do, we want to disable the circle collider 2D. So basically we need to go over to we can use this circle collider 2D. Basically we're just going over to that circle collider 2D, and then we're gonna use this dot enable, and we're gonna set equal to false. So a circle dot enable set equal to false basically means you just disabling this circle collider 2D, as you can see, or you can simply say uncheck. If I just uncheck, as you can notice, it gets unchecked. And also we need to set the gravity scale to 0, so it's not gonna fall down at all. So we need to move over to rigid body 2D. So after disabling the circle collider 2D, we're gonna disable our rigid body 2D. So let's go to rb dot gravity scale, and we're gonna set equal to 0f, and we're gonna close that up with semicolon, and let's press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now if we move over to Unity, you will see that. So firstly, what we're doing, we just going over to this circle collider 2D, and we just disabling that, or you can simply say unchecking, so this player game object can easily pass through it. And after doing that, we also setting the gravity scale to 0 of this spot game object, so it's not gonna fall down at all due to our gravity. So just wait a moment, and if I just go ahead and then click on this play button in the top, you will see as soon as we're gonna shoot on this pod game object, you will able to notice this pod game object. Firstly, it's gonna play that animation clip, which is the distraction one, and after playing that, the circle collider 2D will be disabled. As you can notice, the circle collider 2D is enabled, and if we shoot on it, as you can see, as soon as we shoot, this played the destructible animation clip. And if I select my pod game object, then go over to inspector, we can see this circle collider 2D gets unchecked, basically disabled, and we can easily pass through it by now, as you can notice. And also we can see, if we move over to rigid body 2D, then gravity scale, and we can notice it's set to 0. So we have done inside our step. So I hope get the idea that how you can do it. And let's suppose you just want to destroy this pod game object after some period of time, after playing this animation clip. So to destroy it, we need to use a function called destroy function. To do that, let's get out of play mode, and we're gonna move over to strip one more time. And to do that, we need to use this destroy function. So this function, as a first argument, it's gonna take the game object that we want to destroy. So in our case, the pod game object itself we want to destroy, so we're gonna pass this dot game object. It's basically means the pod game object referencing itself. Second thing, comma, you can specify the time after which amount of time you just want to destroy. So after 5 seconds I want to destroy, so that's why I'm gonna put 5f, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our skip. And now let's move over to Unity, and you will see after playing the destructible animation clip, this pod game object just gonna destroy itself after 5 seconds. So just wait a moment, and you will able to notice that. So just wait a moment. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it, and let's check that out, and we're gonna do that. So let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game, and let's have a look on this. So just wait a moment. So now if I just shoot on this pod game object, you will able to notice. So I'm gonna click on this shoot button. As you can see, it's played that animation clip, and after 5 seconds we should able to see, as you can see, indeed after 5 seconds that pod game object just get destroyed itself. So I hope you get the idea, and I'm gonna get out of play mode. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. And make sure if you turn it your pod into a prefab, then make sure you select that, then go over to inspector, overrides, and then apply all. And if you see an plus icon in any component, as you can notice in this destruct component or this script, I can see a plus icon. So to get rid of that, we basically need to move over to overrides in the top, basically move over to inspector, then overrides, and then click on this apply all. So the changes you made inside this pod game object in the hierarchy, it will be saved into this pod game object prefab as well. So if we move over to our project tab, assets, and then prefabs folder, and then select this pod, then go over to inspector, we can notice the distract script is attached to this pod game object as well, and all of the things as we done inside this pod game object in our hierarchy. So the changes just saved into this pod game object prefab as well. So I hope you get the idea that how you can just make a destructible game object, and how you can work with on trigger enter and all of those things. So I hope you get the idea, and thanks for watching this video till the end, and I will see you in the next tutorial.